Us now, GOP Senator Marco Rubio, ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start there. It sounds like this hostage negotiation deal is falling apart. Secretary Blinken said Hamas just needs to say yes. And not only does it not sound like they're saying yes, they've got this shelling this morning at an aid crossing that is going to shut it down. You have been there in recent days with the Prime Minister. They say they're moving in on Rafah. Where do we go from here?
Well, it's their war, and they have a right to fight it. These are degenerate savages, Hamas. I mean, just think about the report that I just heard a second ago, okay? Everybody's saying, send in humanitarian aid. These poor people are starving. Well, that's what they tried to do, and these guys are launching mortar attacks against the humanitarian aid that's coming in. You know that a lot of the humanitarian aid that's getting in, and Israel's allowing it in anyways because they know they need to do it, but Hamas, this stuff's being sold in the marketplace. This administration, this is Israel's war. We should basically say we are on the side of the people who were the victims on October 7th of a bunch of savages and lunatics who came across that border and massacred and killed and kidnapped and raped and took hostages back with them. These people need to be defeated. How is Israel supposed to coexist, to live side by side, alongside, next to these people? And when they talk about displaced people, there are 80,000 Israelis right now that are displaced from the north. They have to live. I saw them. They are living in hotels. Their kids are going to school online in conference rooms at hotels. They can't go north because Hezbollah is attacking them in northern Israel. So this is a time where we need to have not a weak and feeble president, but someone who makes it very clear that we are on Israel's side. They are the good guys in this fight, and Hamas are the evil ones. And these terrible civilian casualties that are happening is because Hamas is using them as human shields.
Well, and I think that a lot of people, as we watch these campus protests and demonstrations spread, would agree that nobody wants civilians to be killed in this process. But in many of those cases, clearly they have crossed the line to actually threatening fellow students, those kinds of things. We're hearing now from some international students who are speaking up saying they worry that because they may be suspended or disciplined, it could cost them their student visa to be here in the U.S. Do you think that's going too far? Or do you think that's an appropriate response?
I think Joe Biden, or he hasn't done it again because he's weak and he's feeble. But Joe Biden, very early on, should have said, as I asked him to do back in October, if you're in the streets of the United States, you're here as a visitor on a visa. Okay, you're not an American. You're here on a visa, and you're here to teach, or you're here to go to school, and you're out there chanting on behalf of Hamas and Hezbollah and these terrorist groups, who, by the way, also hate America. We should revoke your visa. If you are here in this country as a visitor on a visa, and you are defacing statues of George Washington, ripping down American flags, putting up Palestinian flags, you should have your visa revoked and eliminated. And he should have been very clear about whose side we're on from the very beginning. But there's a bunch of Democratic donors, major Democratic donors, who are behind the groups that are funding all this. I saw the other day, I think it was in UCLA, there's thousands of dollars of plywood that they were using as barricades against the police. They're committing acts of violence, not just acts of anti-Semitism, acts of violence, of vandalism, threatening people. I saw another video of a Jewish student who had to get police, had to basically shame the police into escorting him so that he could go into an area of the university where he had every right to be because of these zombies, these anti-Semitic, left-wing nutcases that the president should have been very firm about. And that's why everything in America is in chaos, from our border to our campuses, total chaos, because we have a weak and we have a feeble president who cannot communicate and refuses to take a strong line on this because he's afraid of people voting against him in November who support these crazy ideas.
Well, do you give him some credit for the speech this week? He clearly denounced what has crossed the line, saying, listen, we got to have free speech protections. We have a First Amendment. He did come out and make stronger remarks than that. But at the same time, we haven't seen that we know of action by the DOJ. Are you surprised there aren't some civil rights investigations? Maybe they've been launched, but certainly not publicly.
Well, he gave a short speech off of note cards 7 days into this crisis. We should have heard from him from the very beginning. Look, these are students from all over the country. Think about this. The people who, you know who's not getting any coverage right now? The kids who paid $80,000 a year to go to these universities, who can't take finals, can't use the library, can't go to class, many of whom have dropped out of school. Who's fighting for them? Joe Biden should have spoken about them very early in this process. His failure to address this early on and to make very clear whose side he was on has just fed this, has just increased this. He should have been very clear and defined himself early on about this. And they're not doing anything about it as far as I can see. I mean, where are the, I want to see if they put as much resource and time into investigating this people as they've investigated other people in the last couple of years.
Well, we know the Department of Education has launched some investigations. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But I want to get to a couple of other domestic issues with you. The issue of abortion has been a very difficult one for Republicans. You seem to be of the mindset that you need to embrace it and try to control the conversation in a better way and actually talk about it, not run from it. Democrats, though, feel like it's a great case to make against you. Here's the vice president in Florida days ago when the 6-week ban in Florida went into effect.
Since Roe was overturned, every time reproductive freedom has been on the ballot, the people of America voted for freedom.
Now, the Florida Supreme Court has said an abortion measure can be on the Florida ballot there in November. How worried are you about that motivating the base?
Well, what I'm more worried about is that no one ever asked the vice president, Kamala Harris, or any Democrat, what restrictions do they support? Which abortion should not be allowed? They never tell you. Should someone be allowed to do an abortion on the day of birth, after birth, 9 months? Should past the point of viability? Well, they will never tell you which abortions should not be allowed. Okay, they're always demanding to know what exceptions do you support, but they never tell you which restrictions they would support. They are extremists. They believe abortion should be allowed at any time, for any reason, basically, and paid for by taxpayers. No one ever asked Kamala Harris that. No one ever asked the Democrats that. So someone should start asking them what their position is on that, and then we can sort of define and decide. All right, what are the policy options here? I've never viewed abortion as a political issue. I believe it is a moral issue. It is the conflict between two rights, a woman's right to choose and an unborn human being's right to live. And I err on the side of life because without life, none of the other rights matter. There's no right to speech. There's no right to vote. There's no right to do anything if you're not alive. And we have to have laws that define how we protect human life. But these people will never tell you what abortion should not be allowed. They are extremists. They are radical extremists. And it is journalistic malpractice for Kamala Harris to repeatedly be allowed to do interviews and never be asked, Kamala Harris, what abortions should not be allowed in America? At which point is it too far and too bad? Never answers that. Never. She's an extremist. They're extremists.